Welcome to Nurturing the Whole Child with Teacher Miriam. Today we look at parenting practices that could have negative impact on the development of your child. The truth is that every parent, or let me say most of the parents, want the very best for their children. And that is why most of the time, whatever we do and however we do it, we always justify it with the line that I wanted the best for my child. I did this because I wanted the best. I wanted my child to turn out well. But do we know that in wanting the very best, we could engage in practices that could actually be so, uh, could have such a negative impact on the development of our children? So, the first practice that is very common amongst parents that we are going to look at today is punitive discipline. What actually is discipline? A lot of times you feel like if I beat a child, if I spank a child, if I yell at a child, I am disciplining that child. What is discipline? Discipline is actually meant to train and not to punish. There's a difference between punishment and discipline. So sometimes, as parents and also just caregivers, we may be involved in punitive acts that we quote unquote call discipline, which could actually have a detrimental effect on the children that we care for. So, which are these practices under punitive discipline that we commonly, I say we commonly, including me, find ourselves getting involved in, and feel like if I don't yell, the child will not respond. So, we are talking about things like yelling, criticizing, shaming, shouting, nagging, the way you are just not letting your child off your case. You are constantly on their case. You feel like you have to keep telling them what to do. You have to, and you don't just have to say it cordially, because there is this ingrained belief that if I don't yell, if I don't shout, then they are not going to respond, and the child uh, patterns themselves around that. So it's a common practice, yes, but it has a negative effect on a child, because what happens, the child just sits there and waits until you yell, until you shout, until you come out in that very negative and imposing way. They're never going to respond. So what happens is that when a child is so accustomed to such kind of practice, when they find themselves in situations where such is not practiced, or where they're not likely to be shouted at, then they become truant. They will not do the right thing because they are still waiting. They have conditioned themselves to that kind of an approach where someone has to shout, someone has to yell at them. That may not sound as bad as the child actually losing their self-esteem, their sense of believing themselves, their self-worth, because it's quite objectifying when every time you want me to do something, you have to tell me, shut that door. Like, what if you say, could you please shut the door? The child would still respond. So it's common amongst caregivers and parents to believe that in order for a child to respond, we have to use that punitive form of discipline where you're feeling like when I talk like this, the child will just shoot up from their chair or from wherever they are doing because I am scared. So you are actually instilling fear and not necessarily discipline, and that is why we are calling it punitive. It's punitive. The child is not responding to you because they have learned to respond by because they feel they have no choice but to respond. And so what you're doing eventually, you are damaging the child, their sense of self-worth, and you put them in a situation where if they find themselves in cordial environments, then they will definitely be uncomfortable, or it will be hard uh, for them. It will be hard for their handlers because they'll keep waiting for that shout, for that yelling, for them to act. So punitive discipline is one of them. Another very common negative parenting or caregiving practice that has a very negative impact on a child's behavior is what we may call physical aggression. A lot of times people feel like, it's just fine to hit a child, it's just fine to push a child. It's not okay at all. If the only way you can instruct your child is through hitting them, through spanking them, through pushing them, through just physically aggressively approaching them, then you are indirectly telling this child that I do not trust that you have a mind of your own, and I do not trust that you can actually do the right thing uh, without being beaten, without being spanked. And so the child grows up associating, knowing that, um, almost expecting. And I'm sure a lot of times as caregivers, we come across children who say, don't tell mom, mom is going to beat me. We hardly hear, don't tell dad, don't tell mom, because mom taught me something different and I have disappointed her. Parents, how that would really sound nice. Even as a teacher, I would feel so nice to hear a child saying, I don't want Teacher Miriam to hear that I did that because Teacher Miriam trained me in a different way. I would be so sad if all that is restraining a child from misbehaving is their fear of being beaten, their fear of being hit. Because you know what, parents and caregivers, this doesn't last long. It's short lived. And for how long do you beat? For how long can you spank? Children grow and they even grow physically. They outgrow their caregivers, they outgrow their parents. They of course remain children, but physically, you won't be beating or hitting a boy who is way taller than you. So it's a negative, other than it's just not being good or appearing good on you as a caregiver. It has such a detrimental effect on a child, because the child, their self-esteem, their self-worth, just like punitive discipline, the child feels like, I'm like an object. They can hit me when they want. They can push me when they want. They can spank me when they want. And it's like I am not trusted enough to use my faculties to do the right thing. Thirdly, we look at cold. I don't know if there's a better word, but we can call it cold or uninvolved parenting, where you're just there as a parent. You can be a parent or a caregiver, and the child you're taking care of doesn't just feel you. They You're not interested. They start talking to you, and you're just not present. So in essence, the child may develop withdrawal. Like the child feels like, I'm insignificant. I'm so tiny. Who knows about me? Who cares about me? So the child feels unheard, and they may develop bitterness or even depression, or just that sense of I don't matter. So as parents or as caregivers, we could be there, but we are not involved. A child, especially the little children, they are so excited about almost everything. So they draw something that doesn't necessarily look like what they intended to draw, and they're running to you and say, Mommy, Daddy, Auntie, see, I've drawn a house. So this is the sitting room, this, and you're looking at it and you're just not present there. And the child feels like, I don't matter. So I don't need to try. So ideally, you're killing the morale of the child, not just for that small activity that they were doing, but it spirals down to any other thing that the child may want to do. It can even go to their academic performance in school, where they feel like whether I work hard, whether I put in my best effort, no one really recognizes what I do. So ideally, the child lives a very low spirited life, loses morale, no interest in anything they do, and it can be seen in other in their in their school life or even in their social life. Like they're not just interested in anything, uninvolved or cold kind of parenting. And you know what, parents, it's very possible for us to feel like, I mean, I have provided all that my child needs. I have paid my bills. I have paid their school fees. I have bought them toys. You know, they're living a comfortable life. They can eat. They can play with whatever they want. But you see, we do not. It is presence over over things, over material things, and that presence needs to be real presence, spirit, body, and soul. And children are intelligent. They know. Sometimes they are seeking your, your praise. They're seeking your attention. They want to hear, well done, thumbs up, keep it up. They want to hear that. And maybe when they come to you, they come with their report form, for instance, or their book where the teacher marked and said, well done, said good work, maybe drew a smiling face, and you receive that book and you coldly place it aside. You're sending a message to your child. You're making them feel tiny, feel unneeded, feel unappreciated. And when they feel that, they start withdrawing and pulling back. So an unintentional, uninvolved parenting practice definitely makes a child feel like I don't matter. The next thing we need to look at is, I think, and this is very closely linked to how we parent generally, a parenting practice. We all know there about all these parenting practices. We know about the authoritative parenting style, authoritarian, permissive, and all that. So there are parenting practices that have negative impact and can affect children's behaviors. Like a child who is taken through or who is parented in a permissive way, chances are that that child can easily be bullied because they take in, like everything goes for them in their home or wherever they are being raised, and so they can easily also feel like it is their duty to take in everything. So if the child is being attended to in a style that every everything they suggest just goes, there are no boundaries, it is okay, you can climb on the chairs, you can jump on the tables, it's fine. So chances are that they'll reflect the same. They will take in everything because even you as a parent are taking in everything. What about the authoritarian parenting style? If a child grows up in a space where it's only the voice of the adult that matters, and it will always be like, do this because teacher said you do it, do this because mom and dad said you do it. So the child's voice is minimized. They are not heard. So again, they coil, they withdraw, they pull back. It still affects their sense of worth. So the balance, authoritative, you don't give in to everything, but you don't become the overly loudest voice in the life of your child. So that balance, parents, that's what we're talking about as caregivers, even as teachers. Do you allow your child to make their suggestions or to have their voices heard? If they are constantly just following instructions, it may look on the face like they are disciplined, but the truth is that their sense of worth is minimalized, their voice is reduced, and so they are not necessarily uh, doing the right thing because they are disciplined, but because they already have formed the opinion of what is expected of them, and so they are constantly seeking approval, constantly wanting to do what they know you want done, but not necessarily what they know should be done. The last one, not necessarily the last one, but just for today's episode, we could talk about inconsistency. As parents, a lot of times we find ourselves just saying, "It's okay, I'm going to do this, and if you do this, I'm not going to do this." You tell your children, if you do not finish your homework in time, there won't be screen time, for instance, or You won't be allowed to go out for practice or whatever it is that you tell them. In this, the children are taking you seriously, but they see they have not done their homework and you're not doing anything, and so they can, you are actually telling them nothing is serious, nothing should be taken serious in life. So they will keep pushing the boundaries because after all you're not consistent. What you said, they don't grow up knowing that there are consequences to actions. So when you say we are not going to do this, we are not going to have this if you don't do this, be consistent. What is the family, what is the structure? How are they expected to behave? For example, over the holidays, when you wake up, what do you just wake up straight to the screen and sit yourself there? You are served breakfast from the couch, you leave the dishes on the table, and like there's no structure, there's no consistency. Ideally, there's nothing expected of this child. It may not look on the surface like it is bad, but what it is communicating to this child is that nothing is serious, there are no structures, there doesn't have to be order, there are no boundaries. I can do what I want when I want. Now, picture such a child in a setting where they are expected to behave and to fit in with other children. It will be chaos because for them, we can shout anytime, we can start playing anytime, we can eat anytime, we can sleep whenever we want, we can wake up whenever we want. So it's important when you're bringing up our children to ensure that there is consistency. And there are so many parenting practices which, quote unquote, we could call them bad caregiving practices. And whatever the most worrying thing is that most of the time when children find themselves as victims of bad parenting and bad caregiving practices, it has a way of replaying later in life, so that if I am a product of bad caregiving practices, most likely I will pass on the same practices to my children and I'll find myself practicing the same. And so it just goes on and on and on. And we have a generation of people who are products of bad caregiving skills. And so this talk and many others to follow is to help us as caregivers to realize that the, our intention is not to just get the results. Like, most of the time you when you yell at a child and when you shout at a child, you get instant compliance. But that compliance is just for them, but it doesn't transform the child. So as caregivers and as parents, our intention is usually to have a child who can regulate themselves, a child who can take care of themselves, not just within the context of suppression, not within a context where they are suppressed, where they are acting because they're expected to act in a certain way, but children who grow up knowing that this is right, and if I mess up, I can own up my mistake and I can always make up and get better. So while as parents, and I like using the term parents uh, together with caregivers, because as parents we're also caregivers. We also have people taking care of children who are not necessarily there. So the word caregiver then applies to such people. So we need to realize that other than providing material things, because that is really good. I mean, again, a child who suffers neglect, whether physically or emotionally, will also have behavior problems. But other than just providing the tangible things, making sure your child has what they need at their developmental stage, we need to realize that we could also take care of how we handle these children, in the sense uh, of how we talk to them, how we interact with them, what we say to them, so that we don't feel justified that I've done all that I can, because we are hearing this quite a lot. Parents feeling like, I gave my child my all, and what did my child do? They disappointed me. So we need to look into ourselves and ask ourselves, other than just providing what all all that we think our children need, are we also handling them in a way that supports positive development? Are we doing positive things? Are we talking to them in a positive way that builds them? Because what builds someone is not necessarily what is around them, but actually what goes into them. What are you telling them? What is your how does your reaction to your child tell them about you? Is there praise, for instance? Are you encouraging your child, or are you just saying, I know even after I've done all this, you'll still turn out badly? That is just a word, but it's not, again, just a word. It's a word that could have far reaching implications. And we don't want to raise a generation that will again raise another generation of unhappy children, of children who are bitter, children who are withdrawing, and then we have this cycle continuing because we have information and we are living in an information-rich era. Parents and caregivers, we need to do better. We need to realize that raising a child and nurturing a child is far much more than providing the physical and the material things that children need to grow. So for this and much more, keep it locked at Nurturing the Whole Child with Teacher Miriam. We are going to learn more and more on how to nurture a child in totality in this channel, Nurturing the Whole Child with Teacher Miriam.